Innovation for the Nation continues on with our Hangout series. Glad to have so many of you back in here. Hope you enjoyed that keynote address that we just had with Milo Medin from Google. Set the stage about connectivity, not just as a technology, but connecting people as well. A lot of action was going on Twitter. Let me remind you about that hashtag we're using, hashtag IFTN13. Innovation for the Nation. IFTN13 is the hashtag. One of the comments that came across during the keynote address, and it was retweeted from something that Milo shared with us, was don't settle for what we have. Flint Waters is a man that did not settle for what he had. He's the CIO up in Wyoming. He came on board into his position after the state had gone Google. They had moved on over to Gmail. They had been using calendaring functions. And then what did Flint do? He started pushing buttons. He started seeing what could this new toy, what could this new tool do for him, do for the state. And that's the story we're going to share with you all for the next 20 minutes or so. Again, Flint Waters, the CIO of Wyoming, joined by Jeff Brown, the state, local, and education sales manager with Google. I had mentioned in our opening that we're going to have a different variety of presentations. Some are going to be slides, some will be demos. This will be a Q&A, so it's going to be Jeff and Flint in conversation talking about really what Flint has been doing in terms of paving the road, putting out those mile markers, and being a guide, being someone that is giving direction to other states, other governments to kind of follow his lead in pushing the boundaries, being on the cutting edge, the bleeding edge. So that's what we're talking about here. You keep your comments coming to us, hashtag IFTN13. And with that, Jeff, let me turn it over to you and we'll begin that conversation.
Great, thank you, James. As you said, my name is Jeff Brown, for Google account manager. Had the pleasure with talking with Flint Waters, the CIO. And I've had the pleasure of about the last 2 years, to take James' words, watching Flint push some buttons and really advancing the state. So, Flint, let me just start back about 2 years ago. So, 2 years ago, Governor Matt Mead announced that the state of Wyoming was the very first state to choose Google and go to the Google Cloud. So first, a quick whoop whoop. That's awesome. But what I'd like to ask is, can you tell us a little bit about why you guys made that decision a couple years ago?
Well, sure, Jeff. I actually came in the week that they were doing the rollout. There'd been quite a bit of work to try and consolidate the state's email systems, try and get a single directory. They had, depending on who's counting, anywhere between 13 and 15 disparate email systems, and you couldn't connect directly with just about anybody in the state. So they did a big push, and the day that I walked in, it was they met me at the door and said you can have a BlackBerry and a Windows box, and we from the Google shift we started lifting from there.
Nice. So, do you think having the governor as a tech-savvy or innovative type of person is important? I mean, to make that decision and be involved with that, is that crucial on a scale from 1 to 10? Is it a must type of thing?
Well, there's no question it's a huge advantage. Having a governor that recognizes that advances in tech, if used properly, are definitely a quality of life impact makes all the difference in the world. So when we started talking about wanting to have access anywhere from any device at any time, he was in. He's carrying portable devices, smartphone, tablets. He's on the road. He's in communication constantly. Having that motivation from the top and that direction across the board with all the cabinet, there's no question that's the greatest edge we could have had walking in the door.
You have to. Yeah, absolutely. As a salesperson, when we go in and we talk to our accounts, security comes up, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But a big piece is the transition, right? Individuals are used to using a certain platform. I know with you guys, you can talk about it. You had multiple, which makes it that much more interesting, right?
Right.
But if you could talk to us about what was that migration like for you? I mean, you were right here right as that was happening. So you can talk about how that transition happened, maybe using how you use Google Drive, Google Docs today. I'd love to hear that.
Sure. So we started with shifting everybody's disparate email systems in, and that took off pretty well. But we had marketed this in the state as an email transition, and we very quickly figured out that we missed the boat on that. We really should have recognized from the very front end that this was an opportunity to have a paradigm-shifting moment in how we embrace technology for the state. So moving to the simultaneous authoring of the documents, moving to the ability to share without all the work group servers, without everybody having to run their own domain. I mean, that was just a massive shift for us, for the state. It was very much a cultural change. We went mobile. So many people walked away from their physical desktop, and now we do hallway meetings. We do innovation on the fly as we're moving. They can go in and create a collection and share communications across disciplines. So game and fish, DOT, health. They could jump in and open up a share and start sharing as easily as they used to address an email. And in fact, it's even easier because before they didn't even have a single directory to find everybody for their email. So that was a very big change. And it takes a mindset shift. So many folks in the state had kind of a sense of investment in themselves and the technology they had learned to use. So in their agency, they were the best at how to get around in GroupWise or in Outlook, whatever their agency used. And there was this concern on the front end that I didn't really anticipate, that we were kind of taken away from their personal investment, because we were challenging what they were the best at. And by demonstrating to them how much the new tools could give them and how much we could leverage their willingness and experience in becoming the best in their shop at that tech with a huge new suite of tools, they could continue their investment in themselves. And that was a pretty big shift. We very much had to change that message and help folks realize that the value of what they saw in themselves, not only did it continue to exist, but it was exponentially enhanceable, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And they got behind it, and I know there's a couple of projects that I want to talk about. One, you mentioned setting up like Hangouts, right? So my quick story for everybody watching is probably about a year and a half ago, State of Wyoming Flint run a monthly meeting, right, called the ITCC. So all the vendors come in, a lot of the state organizations come in. And first it's a typical, there's a conference line set up, right? You got people all throughout the state calling in, listening. And so, Flint, can you tell us what happens today? So maybe how people present or what people are doing. I think it's a really interesting way that you're using the technology for what it's there. It's changing government, and if you could talk about that.
And so we switched that out, and we're doing Google Hangouts for those activities now, and it's publicly accessible. So now all of our vendors can participate through the video sessions. And Wyoming's a pretty big state, not a lot of people, but pretty good sized landmass. So being able to shorten our roads through that tech is a huge issue. Now, I don't know how many folks have traveled through Wyoming, but it's not uncommon to drive down Main Street in a bunch of our small towns and see two good old boys sitting side by side in their pickup talking through the window. You'll see a couple of ranchers sharing stories on Main Street, and folks just drive around them. And that is a cultural norm here. You look somebody in the eye when you're talking to them. And we've just extended that metaphor using the tech, so we didn't have to abandon our society, what we're accustomed to. We've extended those Hangouts to our help desk. So not only can you do a help ticket or call in, right, you can join a Hangout that's always staffed. You can look the technician in the eye. You can talk about the challenge that you're having, and we've found there's far less likelihood of folks dropping the football when they have connected with the person that needs some assistance to keep their job going. So that's been a big change for us. The governor, when he did his energy policy statewide, when he released it, he did it on a Hangout on air. And that's how he shared it, so that all the citizens could go in and in real time type questions back to the governor himself. How is this working? What are you looking to do? It's really been an amazing shift.
That's a big one. So you mentioned, we talked about Google Drive a little bit. We talked about how your the employees have embraced it. It sounds like you trained them and you moved them into it. I don't say softly, but they definitely grasped it and started being creative. And so the session is about something that's really important. If we could talk about this next, and it's the workflow piece. It's to James's point about when you started pushing buttons, and I really want to talk about this for a minute because it's such a impactful thing. And I've used the word changing government, and this truly is, right? I mean, this is something you guys are doing. So if you could talk about a couple of the ways that you've been using what we'll call App Engine, right, or some of the things you're doing in workflow that are not mail, it's not calendar, but it's some game-changing things that you guys are doing, by the way. No Google involvement, no partner involvement, right? This is an organic thing that you guys have done. So let me just stop for a second and just have you talk for that piece.
Well, we used to have a workflow process, for example, to run a business case through to justify some of the major tech initiatives that we do for the state. And the former process took somewhere around 6 months from at the grassroots, the person's starting to write up what they think they need to do to make the deployment of health department services better, or workforce services, or family service, wherever they're working. That 6-month process, we attacked that and tried to change it, tried to reinvent it, because so much of the workflow and the solutions that are implemented right now across government, and probably in business as well, many of those were established back when it was a floppy drive sharing solution, or they would fax in phases of that workflow. And I think that comes back to the fact that oftentimes when we look at technology, we try to figure out how to do what we do today using the new tech. And instead of figuring out how I use this spreadsheet like I used the old one, we tried to go back and just reinvent the workflow. If tech wasn't a limit, what would the perfect workflow be? Then let's go to the tools and attack them and try and figure out how we make them comply with what we wanted that perfect workflow to be. And so with the business case solution, we went in, we used the simultaneous authoring, we built a system using App Engine that tracked all the communications, all the process. It gave transparency to the end users. So now instead of capturing the kind of the frame, the collaborative thought at 1 frame per day when someone sticks it in a static document and sends it, we go in and simultaneously capture that in the documents. And at the 4th or 5th level of governance, when they connect and start reviewing, the initial author is still connected, attached, and in the conversation. And there's not this exchange. That we used to handle that like an email would get sent to the manager and then forward to the supervisor and then down to the worker, and they'd answer the question and then it'd go back up and get messed up, and it was a lot of challenge for us. And now we've improved really the knowledge of everyone in the process, because they can see it in real time as those conversations take place. So we built that out using App Engine. We share it using the web, so there's no DR issues. You can access it anywhere from any device. I now have folks that can check on the status of their business case request, of their help tickets from a Nexus tablet. And that has been huge. We've cut that down to at most a 1-month process, and the reason it's at a month is now the physical limitation. We bring citizens in to also review these business cases, and they're volunteers. And I don't like to ask them to come in multiple times every month. So now we're down to a realistic limitation, not something that tech imposed on us, and we all learn to live with.
So a 6-month, right? Or 6 months down to a couple of weeks, something like that. Does that sound about right?
Right. Depending on when you submit it, is much faster, much easier to turn solutions around. And we've designed it so that the modules we built for this workflow manager, we use it also in our procurement system.
Right.
We use it for the governor's constituency relationship manager. We've set that all up. It lets us take those plugs. We've very heavily invested in building on that App Engine solution.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the needs, I'll just tell you quickly, is the governor can go to a different district, a different area of Wyoming, gets the feedback from the emails, whether it's about wolves or it's about some bridge or things that are happening. So literally, right, where he's GPSed at, I mean, that, right? Come on.
Right, so we set that up so that when, you have the citizen in Green River that writes a letter to the governor because they're concerned about what's going on in government. That's scanned in, loaded into Google Docs, and we have all of that set up so that it's geographically relevant depending on where the governor's going. It's all issue dependent. As he's moving into a community, he can bring up and see where the citizen feedback is coming from, what the message is, and he can even pick a message and drill down into it and see the scanned copy of the citizen's letter. And we have a pretty amazing governor. He comes in on the weekends. He goes through those, and he calls citizens back, and he'll sit on the phone and talk to them.
Right.
He doesn't necessarily agree, but if he disagrees, he'll explain why.
Right.
And it's really changed the transparency of government. It's been huge. And there's also that impact of folks being able to know that their communications are getting through, their voices are being heard, and we can deploy it very easily. Now we're working on a solution that will allow him to highlight those messages and record a video message back to the citizen and deploy it back to him. So it's very exciting, and it's not standing still. We're a continuous improvement agency. We keep coming back and pushing. Google, how can you help us make this work even better?
Right. I love it. All right, so I got a security question coming up for you, but I wanted to say something because I think so. Most of you watching are part of the federal, state, local entities, the public sector. And what's interesting is when you do commercial, the private sector, you are in a kind of a competitive mode. And so what Flint has done is Wyoming's talked with Colorado, and Colorado's come up and visited here and said, what are you guys doing? Because we'd love to get to that phase 3, phase 4. And so Flint's team has shared their knowledge and say, hey, here's the pre-built 80% for this procurement thing, or for this single sign-on thing, or for this government CRM thing. So I wanted to quickly tell everybody that's such a unique thing in the public sector, because, hey, we're nonprofit, right? We're all about the citizens and doing good for government. So I think it's a really neat thing that you guys are sharing that and willing to talk with others. Okay, so security. Let's do this, because it's always one or two. We already talked about change management. Everybody, if you were to Google Flint Waters, you would see his background is absolutely in the cyber security world for IT. And so, I'll just ask the question, because it's got to be in the top of your mind. We talked about, your governor looking at emails from citizens and things happening. It's very confidential information. So, I guess the point blank question is, how do you feel about the security with Google and Google's cloud?
It's been so much of an improvement for the state, because in many cases we had these little workgroup servers that were managed by somebody who was, their day job was engineer, or their day job was game and fish biologist, or they worked in specific areas, and they had a little isolated workgroup server that they took care of their email on, and as soon as it hit the open internet, of course, it was clear text and running up and down that fiber for anybody to see. It was a pretty big deal. When we moved over to the cloud, we're now hitting those secure Google data centers. Everything is encrypted from point to point. They don't have that issue now that cross communication goes out of their control as soon as they hit the send button. And we've extended, so we're using the other product features that let us send it out to a prosecutor, to someone not inside the state's network, and encrypt it all the way to their desktop as they read it. It's been a pretty big deal. One of the things that we didn't really recognize as a lift here, we had so many agencies that were running servers in hallways. They were running them in a closet. As we moved and gave them the ability to share their documents, to store their documents, to use the cloud for all this type of business workflow, we were able to pull those servers out of those areas and get away from the physical risk of someone walking in, picking up this device, and carrying it out the door. Because, as you know, physical access pretty much negates all the digital security you put into place. Now, that's been huge for us. The state ran data centers. When I came in, there was a discussion to stand up a $40 million data center for the state. And while I very much appreciated it, it would have given us a beautiful single point of failure. And that's really not the design we're trying to follow now, because we cover all of Wyoming, not just Cheyenne. And we need that to be able to reach out everyone. We've been very impressed with how it has improved. And I ran the servers before I came in for the state on the child protection side. So I'm comfortable with the risk of what happens if someone gets into those devices.
Right. So thank you. So obviously very comfortable. Your team has gone through the FISMA certifications and things. You mentioned encryption from point to point. All those things are essentially very important, because you have different departments, and I think everybody's out here. Corrections has a total different business case than Health and Human Services and transportation, and so I think security components for every department is equally as important. So I want to thank you for that. So you're already in phase 5, right? What's next? How do you where do you want to take the state here? Let's just say in the next year or so.
Well, we're shutting down all of the physical video conferencing equipment that the state had. Our legislature last year defunded it. In fact, we spent more on the video conferencing units than we pay for the Google services. So by moving the state.
Sorry, if you say that one more time. I'm sorry, just kidding.
Well, and just keeping the. When I walked in, there was a video conference unit on my desk that was the cost of a Hyundai. We got rid of all of that. We moved it all out. It was really funny how it happened. The governor flew to meet some troops that were returning, some guard troops that were returning from overseas. And when he flew to meet them at this big auditorium, the airport got socked in and he couldn't land. So they brought him back to Cheyenne. We ran over, set him up with video conference stuff, got him hooked up with just a Logitech camera and a high-speed connection, put him on a big screen there, and he was able to welcome the families and talk to them and have a face-to-face with them, even though the weather wouldn't permit. And that was the end of it. At that moment, all those old legacy video boxes got pulled out, and they're gone. So we're moving the state over to Hangouts. We see that as a high-end solution for shortening our streets here, shorten those roads in Wyoming. And we're also going to be rolling out Google Apps accounts for every student and educator in the state. We're doing a Wild for Life project so that we can provide that and help them preserve their digital presence forever. As they move through school, instead of having to lose all their connections every time they change schools, we're going to keep that available for them and carry them on. So lots coming. Very exciting.
That follows them all the way through. That's amazing. I thought you were going to say something about self-driving, maybe for transportation, or self-driving snowplows or something like that. But so, hey, Flint, I think our time is up for now, for at least the questions that I had. So, James, I want to hand it back to you. See if you've got anything on the Twitter feeds or any questions that the audience might have for Flint.
We do have questions. I've been queuing some things up. Again, folks, if you want to be heard, hashtag IFTN13 over on Twitter. And in fact, let me get over, Brandon is over on Twitter with us, and he was saying that they are following your lead. Looks like he's out there in Colorado, and says the investment you guys have put into the apps engine is remarkable. Game-changing model. They are following it in Colorado. So, Brandon, thanks for that message delivered, sir. Hallway meetings. You said, Flint, you do hallway meetings. What is a hallway meeting?
Well, we're in an old schoolhouse, and so we've got these massive hallways where they used to accommodate all the kids dumping out of class and in the session breaks. So what we did is we went out and picked up some standing height tables and ran them up and down the halls, put some video and some whiteboards up, and then I closed a bunch of the meeting rooms in our building. So instead of folks booking an hour and disappearing somewhere to have discussions about the future of our tech, we make them meet in the halls. And so now you'll see the network teams stand around these meetings. They do scrum, so someone will set the clock, and they'll have 10 minutes or 15 minutes to get through their items and problem solve. And that way server folks wander through, they join in the conversation, or they just listen to hear what's happening. It's kind of that theme of trying to force the collaboration, force the collision of the folks that can bring their brilliance to bear on what we're trying to solve for the state. And it's been huge. It's made a huge difference. We're taking ourselves a lot less seriously than we used to. You'll see them cutting up out there, and from time to time, they'll be problem solving, and at lunch they'll have slot car races in the hall. So it's really changed our culture, and the fact that they're so portable has made a huge difference, because now they can just walk up with their tablet, connect, and they're live.
All right. James, a quick thing here. I think it was about a month ago I was visiting, and in the hallway hangouts, they were doing a Mexican fiesta theme. It's hilarious. So people are having fun, literally having fun, talking with their peers on Hangouts, talking with some other people maybe across the state who couldn't be here in person. So, as Flint said, really are trying to change some things here and actually have a little fun at the same time.
Well, it carries on that idea of looking someone in the eye. It also brings that connectivity. I started with Milo during the keynote saying, hey, it's a technology. The connection is technology, but it really, that's the foundation, but it's more than that. It is connecting people, again, to do work, and ultimately the government space, that's what we want to do. We want to work together, and then ultimately serve the citizens and folks out there. CT over on Twitter, he's been tweeting a lot here, so appreciate it today, CT. Flint, he's asking this question: how long does it take to update the best practices at the governor-level executive secretariat, changing that mindset of what had got to have been a very kind of entrenched way of doing things?
Well, without a doubt, you really need to move towards this concept of an agile culture. It's not just agile development. We went in and met with the governor. We showed him all the new technology. We go in and just get him excited about the things that he can work with and work on. So we went in and we pulled out the presentation projector out of his office. We set him up with wireless connectivity to the video feeds in there. He can go in and do interviews. So he interviews positions now through Hangouts, and he'll have the guy on the big screen. Really, it's a matter, if you've got somebody that's passionate about tech and how it can positively impact us, you put the right tool in their hands and they're off and running. I took a little mini tablet over there. I just gotten it in. It was a brand new release. Walked into the Deputy Chief of Staff office to show it. Somehow the governor sensed I had new tech. He shows up 30 seconds later, picks it up, looks at it, disappears. I haven't seen it since. So getting him access to that type of technology and showing how it makes things run better has been massive. And of course, the directors, who spend a lot of their time practicing being stoic, can't really resist when the governor says, don't send me an email and request 45 minutes. Jump on the chat, jump on the video, and let's talk.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Let me stop down for a quick moment here just to mention again, we've got a lot of activity on Twitter. Marty is out there. He posed a general question asking if anyone out there was working with juveniles using Google Hangouts, and then mentioned also that a lot of perspectives were being shared in the resource lounge, the networking lounge, about that idea. So again, folks, Twitter, the networking lounge, these are going to be great areas outside of the Hangouts that we'll be doing to just share ideas. And in fact, I'll plug right now, Jeff and Flint, as well as some folks that are joining us from some of our sponsors and partner companies, Cloud Sherpas and SADA Systems. They'll be doing a live scheduled chat coming up in about 5 minutes from now for the next half hour. So we'll be stopping down in a couple minutes. Got one or two more questions for you, Flint. And then folks, will encourage you, head on over to the networking lounge, continue the conversation with these two guys, and again, reps from our partner companies. That's what we'll be doing, kind of our theme throughout the rest of the day. On the technical front, Flint, to prepare to make some of these cultural changes, and I want to talk about both ideas, but on the technical front, what advice do you have for other CIOs like yourself, whether it's of a state or whether it's someone that's running a large city? What can they do on the technical front to start preparing themselves for the change? We'll talk about the cultural aspect in a second.
Well, I think a lot of it is asking yourself less about where have you been and more about where do you want to go. I think that's a lot of the discussion, because a lot of questions come through on how do we manage this piece of data that is tied into some sort of legacy solution. When we tackled this, one of the things that we wanted to force the discussion to be is how do we reinvent? How do we start over in several areas? So we have a lot of places where we had legacy database servers and committed processes that were tied to that. So instead of trying to figure out should we migrate, how do we lift, we brought in a guy and he wrote a synchronization solution in a couple of days that we could point it at legacy databases. It would replicate the schema, load it into the HRD in Google's App Engine Cloud, and give us a publicly accessible, if we wished, complete copy of that database and keep it synchronized. So instead of just the walking away from how we did, or do we have to reinvent from the ground up, look at all the potential ways that we can leverage this technology to answer tomorrow's question. And that was a big lift for us. Also, that whole discussion of when you're asking it, how do I move to portable? How do I move to access anywhere and bring your own device? You look to folks that are doing that really well, and that's been a very big discussion for us at the conferences that we have with the other CIOs. It comes up frequently.
Hey, Flint, can I jump in here? Sorry, guys. I'm going to be in trouble. I didn't ask this question point blank. Flint, has the state of Wyoming saved any money, for crying out loud?
Well, without a doubt. We reduced staffing through attrition by 14 positions. We had far less servers to manage. The true tangible is going to be very difficult to get above that. So there's $1 million a year right there we're saving. But above that, there's going to be more, because what happened before when a game and fish biologist and a guy at DOT and somebody at Health collaborated, it took them days or weeks to co-author documents and get things done, and now those things are happening instantly. So there's also that very difficult to count the tangible savings of being able to produce, collaborate, and deploy so much faster. There's no question we're saving. We saved more on the video conferencing equipment we shut down than we paid.
The Hyundai, the Hyundai. We replaced the Hyundais all.
That was huge, yeah. $15,000 box on my desk. I didn't need it.
Right.
Let me piggyback that cultural question now. We've talked a little bit, and you've shared kind of the cultural at the high level. What about the average knowledge worker that's facing some of the citizens out there that are asking for documents or other requests or things like that? Was that a hard cultural shift? Did people just say, yeah, this is pretty easy? I mean, I use Gmail at home, now I'm using it here. I mean, what was that like for you guys?
Well, it's kind of interesting, and of course it's going to vary from person to person, because some folks are more, more interested in adopting new technology and challenging new technology, and others don't want anything to change. So it really kind of varies where they fall in that camp. But depending on how you look at it across the state, we have huge portions of our culture that are used to doing that every day. I get home, my son is in a hangout, and he and 3 kids in his class are co-authoring a presentation for tomorrow's class. That's how that works, right? They're used to it. It just kind of depends on where we reach into the economy. Before, they didn't have any method of tying into our state systems and getting data. So it's not like they're having to relearn something to be able to get in. This has been huge. We're working on the single sign-on so that when citizens get an account to interact with health, later they can interact with DFS using the same account. And that's just going to make life easier for them and make us far more accessible and transparent.
It is. It is. You've made a change in David. He loves the hallway meetings. He is going to ask for someone to tear out some walls. So sledgehammer sales may be going up in David's state there.
Flint, you're breaking down walls. There
you go. There's your metaphor.
Jeff,
it's kind of funny. We tore out a bunch of the cubicle walls as well because we had these little mazes that employees would wander through, and I had folks wondering where the cheese was at the end. So we kind of had to break through that and move to more bullpen and collaborative environments. It's been huge.
Folks, conversation continues, but not here in this hangout. We are going to have Flint and Jeff transfer over to the networking lounge. Again, they're going to be doing a scheduled chat there with some partners from SADA Systems and Cloud Sherpas, so I encourage you to head on over there for that. Make sure you come back here in just about a half hour, 11 a.m. Pacific time. We're going to be moving across the country from Wyoming. We'll be moving across to Michigan, Macomb County, and talking about land records, searching for those deeds, property information, and what Todd Schmitz and team have done up there to really modernize their land records search for their constituency and citizens out there. So join us for that. That's 11 a.m. Pacific time, coming up just about a half hour. Jeff and Flint, we'll see you and a bunch of folks over in the chat. And for the meantime, folks, remember the hashtag IFTN13, and we'll see you all back here in about a half hour.